Hello and welcome. My name is Lloyd Burrell. My mission is sharing solutions and raising awareness so that we can all live a happy and healthy life in our electromagnetic world. Today, I'm thrilled to have as my guest, Cathy Cooke. Cathy Cooke is a board certified holistic nutritionist and uses a functional medicine approach to help people identify imbalances in the body. She's also a certified building biology environmental consultant and certified electromagnetic radiation specialist with the Building Biology Institute. She assesses buildings for anything that may be causing health problems, including indoor air quality, mold, chemical off-gassing, ventilation, and of course, EMF exposure. Combining holistic nutrition and building biology, Cathy addresses both the body and environment to help her clients achieve optimum health. She is also the founder of Idahoans for Safe Technology, an advocacy and awareness group for the safer use of modern day communications. So today we're going to be talking about Cathy's EMF remediation work, what that entails, also how to use nutritional support to deal with EMF related symptoms. And we're also going to be talking about 5G. How could we resist? Yeah. And how we can protect ourselves in both a collective and individual sense. Cathy is based in Boise, Idaho, and you can contact her through the website wholehomeandbodyhealth.com. So that's all one word, whole as in wholesome, home and bodyhealth.com. Cathy, welcome.
Thank you so much, Lloyd. It's really an honor and a pleasure to be here with you today. And, I just want to thank you personally for all of your work in this very important topic.
Well, thank you so much. I really, really appreciate that. Thank you for saying that. So yeah, I want to start just by asking you, how did you get started? What sparked your interest with electromagnetic fields?
Yeah, well, this is one of those circumstances when someone says, I didn't choose this field, it chose me, right? And it's a pretty common story of, I've been sick for many years. When I was a kid, I was bit by a tick when I was 12. And really, I just haven't been the same since then. And so I'm sure a lot of your listeners can relate to the story of, I went from doctor to doctor for years and years, and everybody just told me that it was in my head and all of my labs looked great. And they sent me home with an antidepressant, and I knew that was not the case for me. I knew there was something physiological going on. So I really struggled for years to get answers. And it wasn't until, oh gosh, maybe 2012 or so that I finally got a Lyme diagnosis from a doctor. So that was a good 30 years later. And I finally got that Lyme diagnosis. And then that sent me on a healing journey because I had answers and things that I could, actually address. And at that point, I decided to become a holistic nutritionist because my life really, everything about my life involved healing and learning about food and health. And I knew so much, I figured now I want to share my results with other people. Yeah. But what happened was, even though I was doing everything right, I had the best diet in the world, I was exercising well, I was managing my stress, I was doing all the things, right? All the things that we're supposed to be doing. But I still wasn't getting the results that I thought I should be getting. I still had very severe insomnia, and I had very severe tinnitus only in my left ear, and a little bit of irritability and anxiety as well. And so in my research, this topic of EMFs kept coming up, but it was just so obscure to me. I just couldn't wrap my head around these invisible waves. So I just kept ignoring it for years. And then finally, in about 2015, I became so desperate after a good 2-week stretch of really not sleeping, a couple of hours here and there. And I just felt, I couldn't even think straight. I could barely function. Finally, I said, okay, I know enough about this topic to put my phone away and turn off my Wi-Fi for a week and just see what happens. So I did that. And lo and behold, the tinnitus I had in my left ear, which is the ear that I used my phone on, it went away in 2 to 3 days, completely gone, has never come back because I've never used a phone in that ear again. And then my sleep got better and better. And so I knew from that experience, which was really life-changing, that I had to know everything there was to know about this topic. And then I just jumped right in and enrolled into the Building Biology Institute, because I knew if I was going to continue to help my clients, I had to understand this piece, because it was so dramatic and impactful for me that I needed to help them with this piece as well. So that's how I became certified as a building biologist.
Thank you, firstly, for sharing that story. And I just wish everybody could hear that. So many people could hear that are struggling with health issues around the world. I think that's one of the things with the EMFs is there are so many people that are being impacted. Well, everybody's been impacted by them, but there are so many people whose health is actually suffering as a consequence of these exposures. And you, obviously with you, you're kind of lucky like me, is you realized that it was EMFs that were doing this, that were having this effect on you, and you're able to take action. But then there's so many people that don't. So it's really important that we share this. And you know, this Lyme disease thing, and I know Dr. Jay Davidson has done quite a bit of work on this, and it is the correlation between Lyme disease and these EMF exposures is quite strong. And that's to say, when people do like what you did and take EMFs out of the equation, or not, we can never take EMFs out of the equation, but we can mitigate, then oftentimes they experience a significant improvement in symptoms like you. So my question is, just to finish off on your little bit of this story here, is where are you today? Are you fully recovered? You know, on a scale of 1 to 10, where 10 is like totally optimum, great, wonderful. Where are you?
Great question. You know, I have great days and I still have bad days here and there. And part of it is because, like most of us, I have to go out in the world, right? So in my home, I have a very low EMF environment, but sometimes, you know, I teach health classes for the local hospital. And sometimes I have to go into the hospital setting, and I'm teaching a class for 8 hours. Well, if you've ever been in a hospital, that's got to be one of the highest EMF exposures, on all of the fields, extremely high. So that can really set me back a little bit. And then, you know, it's been a stressful year for many reasons. If I'm not doing a really great job of managing my stress, or if I'm traveling and I have to get on a plane, you know, then I will experience symptoms for sure. So, and having Lyme for, gosh, it's been 35 years now, that will always be part of my journey. And, you know, I'm really okay with it, because I feel actually very fortunate in the fact that I can work a full-time job. I'm not bedridden. I don't have a lot of pain. You know, I really sympathize with people who have Lyme or mold or, you know, head trauma or these things that keep them bedridden. It's not a good place to be. So I do actually feel fortunate that I have the amount of health that I do, even with my history. So to answer your question on a scale of 1 to 10, you know, I have days that are 6, I have days that are 9s, you know, and anything over a 5 to me is fantastic.
Yes.
Because I spent many, you know, decades being a 2 or a 3.
Yeah.
So I will always continue to achieve, you know, to strive to get to a 10. And if I don't ever get there, that's okay. I feel very blessed that I am where I'm at now, and will always continue to, you know, make progress.
Okay, so clearly with you, EMFs are a big part of the puzzle, and we're going to be talking about EMFs, obviously. And I'd like to also ask you later on about just some general lifestyle tips also. I think people will be interested to hear those, you know, non-EMF stuff, if we've got time, but because there's a lot of things we want to talk about. But just let's you know, talk about this thing, EMFs, electromagnetic fields. And so I know you've researched this quite a bit, and And so the people listening here that are all different stages, some of them, that's the first time they're listening, you know, hearing about this thing, electromagnetic fields, and others, they've heard many interviews with me and other people and done a lot of research. But if I can ask you, what in your view is like the thing we need to understand here? What should everybody understand? And, you know, what is the biggest danger?
Great question. There's two things that come to my mind. One is, you know, you've probably experienced this, Lloyd, where somebody will call you on a cell phone and they're panicking because of the cell tower that they can see from their house. And my initial reaction is, well, you're getting more of an exposure from what's in your home than what is external from your home. So we first have to mitigate the frequencies inside our home, because it's the distance from those devices to us that's causing us the biggest exposure. So we really got to take care of our home environment. And I hear people say all the time, well, what does it matter? You know, the signals are everywhere. When I pull up my computer, I see 30 signals from my neighbors. But what you need to understand is that that antenna in your computer is overly sensitive. It's not really reflective of the actual amount of exposure you're getting from your neighbor's router, for example. So even though it looks like you're getting just bombarded, having a meter there to identify the exposure in your home is really important. And worry about the Wi-Fi in your house, the cell phones in your house, the smart speakers, all of these things. That's going to exponentially reduce your exposure. And then we can worry about the frequencies outside, you know, the cell tower in the distance or whatever. Because I guarantee you your Wi-Fi router is giving you much bigger exposure usually than the cell tower may be, unless it's, you know, a couple of feet from your front yard. So we gotta manage what's in our own home first.
Which by the way, is usually the easiest thing to do also, is it not?
Absolutely. Yeah, you're gonna have, I mean, you can unplug your Wi-Fi router or hardwire it, but you know, what you can do to mitigate the exposure from that cell tower is an entirely different thing. So yes, we got to make sure that we're addressing the devices in our own home first. And then, you know, the biggest danger with EMFs, the other thing that I'm very concerned about is the generation that is being born today. So children who are born today are going to, most of the time, they are going to be inundated with this exposure for 24 hours a day, 7 days a week for their whole lives. And my concern is their development, and I'm concerned for their health long term, because they're never going to know a world without it. And unless we see some radical change and awareness about this, the majority of our children are going to be developing with these exposures. And because of the health impacts that we're aware of, you know, I'm concerned about their long-term development.
Yes, absolutely. It is a concern, particular concern for our kids, and all parents should know about this, about EMFs and what it can do to their kids. You know, all parents, it should be compulsory yes. Parental learning. So yeah, let's talk about your work a little bit as a building biologist. So you're you know, in terms of what you do, you know, if you're going out to a client, maybe you could just walk us through, give us an overview of what exactly that entails.
Sure. So, well, it could be that I'm going to a home for air quality purposes, and I'm testing for mold and chemicals and things like that, which is very important because, Lloyd, as you know, and I've heard many of your guests talk about, if you have a chemical exposure, if you have a mold exposure, you're going to be much more likely to be sensitive to EMFs. So that's an important topic, which is you know, a whole other subject. If I'm going to a home to do an EMF assessment, I'm going to test for the basic 4 fields, which are dirty electricity, or as we call it in the Building Biology Institute, microsurge electrical pollution. And then that's coming from a lot of our energy saving devices. So, CFL light bulbs, LED light bulbs, computer chargers, energy efficient appliances, these things that alter the sine wave, that 60 hertz or 50 hertz sine wave if you're in Europe. So I'm going to be testing for all of that. And then I'm going to be testing for radio frequency. And so radio frequency is all of our wireless devices. That's going to be your cell phone, your Wi-Fi, your Fitbit or fitness tracker, your smart speakers. I've even found stuffed animals with a radio frequency, grills with radio frequency. They make radio frequency tampons these days.
No,
Yes,
you found that?
absolutely. Yes, it sends a signal to your phone when your tampon is full so that you can change it.
Wow, can't believe they're allowed to do that.
Well, absolutely. And we've also got these baby monitors and wearables that you can put on your baby to check your the heart rate and the pulse of your baby overnight, which I am not comfortable with at all. So just so many things in people's houses, and more often than not, I find something in the person's house that they had no idea was there and was actually giving off a radio frequency.
Mm.
And then I'm going to check the magnetic fields, which could be from overhead lines, power lines, or buried power lines. It could be from wiring errors in the house, or point sources like big appliances, refrigerator, furnace, that kind of thing. And lastly, I'm going to check for electric fields. And that is going to be basically just because we run voltage through our walls. And I'm going to help people to reduce their exposure to the high electric fields, mainly in their bedroom, because that's where they're sleeping, and then at their computer setup, because computer setups are often extremely high. So we're going to do some grounding techniques to reduce that exposure. We're really focusing on those areas where they spend the most amount of time, specifically the bedroom, because of course we want the lowest EMF exposure in the bedroom so that we can sleep and repair and heal, so that we can have more resiliency during the day when we do have these exposures.
When you say grounding techniques, you're talking about electrical grounding certain appliances. Is that what you mean?
Yes. So, for example, computers they're tricky. An office setting, a home office setting, or in a remote office is pretty tricky because you've got so much going on electrically. You've got the monitor plugged in, a keyboard, a mouse, speakers, often 2 monitors, a printer. So there's so much voltage here, so much potential for electric fields, that there's different ways that I like to I'm not grounding the person, because there's issues with grounding a person, which we can talk about if you'd like, but I want to ground the device. So it may be that the computer has less of an electric field when we plug it into an outlet, specifically if it has a 3-prong plug. So that 3rd prong is connecting to the ground of the home's wiring system. Or it may be that I'm going to try to ground it with an Ethernet cord, like a Cat 6 or a Cat 7 Ethernet cord that is shielded and has metal on the end of it. And if my router also has a metal connection, I can ground it that way. Or I can put the wires into some conductive tubing and put a gator clip on that conductive tubing and ground it to the outlet that way. So there's different ways that we can try to achieve this. And it really is all about trial and error. So unfortunately, I can't say you should always use your computer plugged in if we're talking about a laptop. You have to, of course, if it's a desktop. But with the laptop, sometimes it works better with it unplugged. Sometimes we reduce the fields with it plugged in. So it's trial and error. We use our meters. We figure out the best approach to get those fields as low as possible.
Yes. So this is something that you don't necessarily have to be a building biologist to do, but you certainly need an EMF meter that can measure electric fields. And you need to kind of play around with this and try different things and see what the reading is. Yeah.
Absolutely. And I recommend everyone has their own meter. I mean, an assessment by a building biologist or an EMF consultant, I feel like is extremely important, but you should also have your own meter because things are changing all the time. And you need to be aware of it, and you need to constantly be checking so that you can take control of your situation and not have to rely on an expert like us, EMF consultant. You need to be able to become proficient yourself with your meters.
Yes. And do you have a recommendation for a meter?
Yes. So there are different meters that I recommend. If budget is a main concern for you, I am a fan of the Cornet 88D. It's the 88 or 88T, I believe, the Cornet 88T, ED88T rather. And I like that one because it tests radio frequency, electric fields, and magnetic fields. And now I've tested that one against my own professional meters. I use the Gigahertz Solutions meters, and it's pretty accurate for the cost. You know, it's around $170, $180. And I feel like for all that you're getting in that meter, it's pretty accurate. I have a lot of clients that use the Tri-Field TF2. That's also a good meter. I prefer the Cornet. I feel like it is just slightly more accurate. But the TF2 is also good because you've got all three fields in that meter as well. And then if somebody wants to spend a little bit more money to get better accuracy, my favorite radio frequency meter these days is the Safe and Sound Pro 2. You know, Rob Metzinger, who is one of our professors at the Building Biology Institute, he kind of created that meter and sells it on his website, and it's fantastic. The accuracy, I mean, many of my colleagues use that meter in addition with their Gigahertz Solutions meters because it's so highly accurate. So that's my favorite radio frequency meter. And then if you wanted to get that plus an electric and magnetic field meter, some of the Gigahertz Solutions meters are pretty inexpensive relatively. For that you can get a combo meter like the ME3030B. I have all of these listed on my website if anybody wants to check those out, because it's a lot to remember, but that's where I would start. So if you've got a little bit more money and you can buy the Safe and Sound Pro and the ME3030B, awesome. If not, go with the Cornet. You're going to get a lot of information from that meter.
Yes. Yeah. Good advice. And so we talked about grounding electrical equipment or grounding computer equipment. And also you mentioned just there, grounding the person, otherwise known as earthing. And so, yeah, let's just, what's your take on that? Because I kind of suspect I might know what it is actually, being a building biologist, but yeah. So what's your position on that?
Okay, sure. Well, we briefly mentioned dirty electricity, right? And so we've got all of this energy saving devices, or it doesn't necessarily have to be energy saving devices. It could be inverters, like if you say you've got solar panels, or you've got a computer charger that's converting DC to AC or AC to DC, alternating current to direct current or vice versa. This puts a significant amount of this dirty electricity on our wires. And if we have a grounding mat or a grounding sheet or whatever it is, and we take the wire that is connected to that grounding mat and we plug it into the grounding wire in one of the outlets in our homes that has all this dirty electricity on it, well, we're bringing that dirty electricity to our bodies. And
you mean connecting, like plugging it in, so it's
right,
plugged into the ground, which is the electrical ground terminal on your home. Yes,
exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. So there could be a lot of noise, is another way to say dirty electricity. There could be a lot of noise on that grounded wire. So I don't want to come into contact with that grounded wire. And
so you measure this noise?
Yes.
So you use the spectrum analyzer for that?
Yes. What I use, well, I used several different devices. I will use a Graham Stetzer meter or green wave meter, and I also use an OWON oscilloscope and a picoscope. So I use a combination of all of those to see how much harmonics and how much distortion of our sine wave that we have on our wires. So what I have found with this is the more sensitive a person is, the more likely they are to have a negative reaction to using these grounding products if they are connected into an outlet in your home. Because of this reason that you've got this dirty electricity on the wire, which you are now becoming part of. However, if you take a stake and put it out into your yard, instead of grounding it into your outlet, I have seen better success with that. However, here in the US, our distribution system has multiple grounds, which means it's a little bit complicated, but it basically means that we send our electricity back to our transformers, back to the substation, back to the power plant through the earth. And because we do that, we've got current on our earth. So that gives us another obstacle of grounding to our yards, because there will be a little bit of current in the earth there. So what I typically tell people is, if you are using these devices and you feel better, then okay, great, go for it. You know, then maybe that's helping you. But if you use these devices and you have symptoms and you feel worse, which I find and I hear from my clients all the time, then don't do it. It's not a good option.
Right. And that's what I was going to ask you. If you have, you know, clear cases where people are grounding like this, earthing, and clearly it's making the symptoms worse.
Yes, I hear that from people all the time. And
is it just you know, the interior grounding, you know, or is it actual people grounding, going outside to ground?
Mostly interior. Generally, you know, I can't say that I have a client that says I can't walk outside. I haven't heard that from any of my clients. I'm sure they're out there. I'm sure that the extremely sensitive people will probably react a little bit to that current that's in the earth. And depending on where you are in the world, that current's going to be a different level, right? If you're in the country, it has the potential to be lower. If you're in the city, it could be much higher, or vice versa. But most people can ground outside and not have an increase in their symptoms. But definitely indoors, if you're grounding to an outlet, I can't tell you how many people tell me that they feel worse. And the bigger concern I have with that is, if they're using a device that they bought from a company, a sheet, a mat, a strap, whatever, the company's response generally has been, it's okay, you're going through a detox reaction, just keep going. And that really bothers me, because I think that's a little bit disingenuous and potentially harmful. Because I don't think it's necessarily a detox reaction. I think it's because we've got so much dirty electricity in our wires, and that's what's increasing their symptoms. And therefore, I think people need to be very cautious about that if they decide to try that grounding technique.
Yes. And then we've got obviously research done by the Earthing Institute, which has shown pretty much in all circumstances that earthing, even indoors, is beneficial, even in what I would call high EMF environments. And I don't, that's not what I recommend to people either. I'm more in line with what you just said, but they have studies on this. So it is kind of, and I don't believe the studies are rigged. Maybe then we need more studies. But it's not clear cut. But what does seem to be pretty clear cut is that going outside, for most people, it has a net beneficial effect. You know, grounding outside, grounding outdoor, grounding in the sea, grounding on the beach, in nature, it has a net beneficial effect. So that's great. So let's talk about, you know, solutions. So that is one potential solution there. In fact, we've got two kinds of grounding, haven't we? The actual grounding electrical equipment, that's a solution for that, which is really important to deal with these electric fields. And then this earthing, which is more of a kind of a way for the body to harmonize more with nature and just provoke this natural healing state, which is our birthright, which seems to have been taken away from us. So that's a way to reclaim that. But let's talk about tips. You know, if you could give, you know, share some tips here on how we can mitigate the effects of EMFs. Maybe some we can do some like inexpensive tips and then some more complex tips, if we could look at those.
Sure. So there's two different approaches here, both of which I feel are equally important. And one is reducing your exposure from what's happening in your environment, and the other is addressing the person and helping your body to become more resilient. So if we're going to talk about reducing the exposure in your environment, well, I think I already mentioned hardwiring your internet. That is number one in my book. If anybody's going to do anything, it is to hardwire your internet with Ethernet cords and turn off the Wi-Fi function on your router or modem, and turn off the Wi-Fi function on your computers, because that right there is going to reduce, I don't, 80, 90% of your exposure right there.
Right.
And that's the most important thing.
Right. And you're right to underline that, is that we don't just plug in the Ethernet cable and then we think we're all good. We have to actually deactivate the Wi-Fi, the wireless on the devices also, because otherwise it keeps going, which is really stupid, but that's how it works. Yeah, most of the time. Right.
Yeah. So that, if anybody's going to take away one thing from this interview, I strongly encourage that action. That's really, really going to be impactful. And then
I was just going to say, it makes it safer. I was going to sell this a little bit more. It makes it faster and safer. The internet connection. Yeah. I mean, safer in terms of loss of data. Obviously it's safer for your health, but loss of data also, and faster.
That's an excellent point. Because people will often hesitate or give me excuses as to why they don't want to do it. But when they realize it's going to give you a much faster connection, much more secure, much more reliable, I mean, what's not to love about that? And is a wire really going to be that inconvenient, right? And you can wire as many devices as you want. There's ways to do that. But you can wire 20 devices in your home if you want to do that. So there really is, little excuses as to why you shouldn't be doing that.
Yeah. Okay. So that's the first most important thing.
Mm-hmm. And then, practicing better cell phone hygiene, I think, is also very, very important. People need to be realistic about the amount of time that they're spending on their phones. And I don't think that people realize that they're looking at it constantly, and that they're constantly checking it, and that they're getting that exposure, even if they're not on a phone call. If they're checking their email, or they're sending a text, or surfing the web, whatever it is, they're getting a pretty large dose of this radio frequency consistently throughout the day. So I think it's really important for people to, have better expectations about how much they're connected to the phone, not only for the EMF exposure, but for your mental health as well, right? Detaching from your phone so that you have more time to do the things in life that you love, to go outside, to exercise, to play with your kids, to read a book, to take a nap, to walk the dog, whatever it is. You will really open up a lot of time in your day if you step away from your phone. And I recommend putting it in airplane mode with the Wi-Fi and the Bluetooth off. And then just check it, a couple times a day. If you need to check it once an hour, whatever it is, so that you don't miss your messages. Or even better is you can forward your cell phone number to a landline if you have a landline, and that way you won't miss any calls. So there's multiple ways to really, have better cell phone hygiene, but I think it's important for most people to take some steps to reduce their exposure from their phone more often.
Okay. And a third tip, perhaps?
Gosh, there's so many. I'm tempted to say get an assessment by a professional, because that's very important. But if money is an issue right now, and you just need some quick and dirty tips, be aware of all these devices that you're bringing into your home. So many houses, smart TVs, smart speakers, smart thermostats, appliances, we don't need all of this stuff. And so if you've got a TV and maybe you don't know, and you're panicking right now and you're saying, I don't know if my TV's smart. No big deal. Just unplug it, right? If you want to watch it for an hour tonight, okay. But during the other 23 hours of the day, if you unplug that TV, that's going to eliminate the exposure. Because believe it or not, even if the TV is off and it's a smart TV, it is emitting its radio frequency exposure all the time. And so many of these devices do, like our Fire Sticks and our Rokus and, all of these things that are communicating wirelessly. Most of them will have a continuous pulsing exposure 24 hours a day. And if you're not sure if yours does or not, just unplug it, use it when you have to, but otherwise keep it unplugged and you're going to dramatically decrease your exposure. Yeah. And lastly, I just wanted to say one more tip. I want everyone to change their light bulbs. The CFL light bulbs and the LED light bulbs, you wouldn't believe how much they contribute to the dirty electricity and potentially electric fields, magnetic fields, or even radio frequency to some degree. If everyone just goes back to the old school incandescent light bulbs, that's going to be a really, really big improvement as well.
Yes. And obviously there's science. We've not really talked about the EMF science, about how EMFs impact the body, but there is a lot of science behind other guests, and we've talked about this. There is a lot of science. I mean, so we've heard your story and how, clearly EMFs were impacting you and they're impacting other people, but there is so much science behind this, and behind every aspect of what you're talking about here, all these different exposures. So even with the CFLs, this compact fluorescent light bulbs, which chop the current, and the LEDs and these inverter devices also that are going with that, maybe that are putting the dirty electricity on there. And the science which is telling us how this is going internal, and it's not because it's a light bulb and it's all in a wire that somehow it's not impacting you. It is, and all these frequencies are impacting us, and this is what the science is telling us. All of this which you mentioned, every single one, the dirty electricity, the magnetic fields, the electric fields, and the radio frequency, obviously the cell phones and all this wireless everybody's using, it's all impacting us, folks, because we are electromagnetic beings, electrical beings, exactly. Subtle energetic beings. So how could it not impact us? So those are your tips for EMFs, in terms of EMF remediation, things which pretty much anybody can do. Most of it is free, by the way, what you've shared there. And obviously the tip, the thing with the light bulbs is, so what's your recommendation? So okay, it's all well and good. Okay, Cathy says we should get rid of our CFL and LED, but then what do we do? So
incandescent light bulbs, you can still get them here in the US. I'm assuming you can still get them in Europe.
You can.
That's the key. And people will say, well, I want to be environmentally friendly. I want to save energy. Well, then just, have some awareness about how much electronic usage that you are consuming, right? And that's a big deal. Just be a little bit more mindful about not having every light on in the house, right? Light what you need. Candles are fantastic. You can have one light bulb on. You don't need the whole house on, so a little bit of awareness about our behaviors can go a long way to actually help us in that regard.
Yes. Okay. Very good advice. So you start off by saying there were two aspects of dealing with EMFs here. There was the reducing the exposure, and there was also this increasing the body's resilience, as you call it. So let's talk to that if we can. And I guess nutrition plays a part of this. So what can we do to improve our resilience?
Absolutely. So nutrition is very important. And as is identifying what underlying issues or precursors that you may have. And this is very important because, like in my case, it was Lyme. I also had a very high exposure to mercury because I had a mouthful of amalgam fillings. So for other people, it could be an emotional trauma, a physical trauma like a head injury or concussion. I have actually several clients who started to have symptoms after they had a knock on the head, right? It could be a mold exposure. Mold exposure is actually a very, very large contributor to EMF sensitivity. I have, again, many clients who were perfectly healthy. They lived in a house that had mold, and then they became sensitive to everything else. Could be a heavy chemical exposure. There's genetics that are involved as well. So I think it's imperative, if somebody's going to build up the body's resiliency to become better able to handle this exposures, that we have to identify what they're dealing with. What is a precursor that may be contributing to their sensitivity? And we have to address that. And, I gave you a big list there. So there's a lot of different ways. You got to be really specific to the individual person to develop a protocol to deal with each of these things that they may be dealing with. And they may be dealing with several. That's very common. And if we're going to get into the diet and nutrition, which is critical, we talked a little bit that the science is out there. And one of the ways that we know that EMFs affect us on a biological level is through oxidative stress, right? And Dr. Martin Paul, a lot of work on this, that non-native EMFs will artificially open the voltage-gated calcium channels. We get this flood of calcium into the cell, and downstream we have this oxidative stress reaction. So when we're choosing what to eat, we need to make sure that we're eating foods that are very nutrient dense and full of antioxidants. So, I'm not really dogmatic about a specific diet for everybody, because everybody's going to respond differently. But whatever diet that you're choosing to follow, we got to make sure it's heavy in antioxidants. It's a whole food, nutrient dense diet. I will say that I've had most of my clients have had the most success with a paleo approach. And that's because for several reasons. The paleo diet really heavily focuses on nutrient density. So it's removing grains and sometimes dairy, which is going to remove pretty much all junk food. And what we have left is, good pasture-based meats, vegetables, fruits, nuts, and seeds. And that's going to give you minerals, vitamins, antioxidants, polyphenols, just the plethora of the building blocks that your body needs to function, which is very important, because if we're deficient in a mineral, if we're deficient in a vitamin, our body can't go through the processes it needs to go to, and we're going to have more symptoms. And also, I feel really strongly that the diet should be as organic as possible, because people who have these sensitivities are almost always having chemical sensitivities. So if we're eating a diet that's not organic and is heavy in pesticides and herbicides, of course, that's going to increase your sensitivities as well. So that's kind of where I like to start with diet, along with balancing blood sugar. And this is so important. And I think this is a huge piece that many people overlook, because if you're not balancing your blood sugar, your body's on basically this blood sugar roller coaster all day long. And that will heavily impact your hormones. And if you've got high cortisol because your blood sugar crashed, and you're going to replace that with sugar or carbohydrate, you're just going to stay on this blood sugar roller coaster all day. You're going to have these huge swings in hormones, and you're not going to feel well. You're not going to sleep well. You're going to be much less likely to recover from the stressors that you're exposed to. So balancing blood sugar is critical, along with those nutrient-dense foods and antioxidants. Mm-hmm. And I could get a little bit deeper. I find that most of my clients who are sensitive also need to go on a low carbohydrate or a low mold diet. I'm not opposed to carbohydrates at all, but carbohydrates tend to be foods that are higher in mold. Things like corn and grains, root vegetables, these are foods that are high in mold. So oftentimes we have to remove them so that the body can, heal from any mold exposure they've had, as well as diets that are high in histamine. So we've seen from the scientific literature that EMFs can actually increase histamine, And when you have too much histamine in the body, you don't sleep well, you're irritable, you have skin issues. I mean, a whole host of, issues that happen when you've got this mast cell disorder or too high of histamine. So we often have to put them on a very simple diet, good pasture-based grass-fed meats and eggs, low histamine vegetables, a little bit of fruit, nuts and seeds, that kind of thing.
Okay. So we've got the EMF sorted out, we've got the diet sorted out, but then we're still not well for some reason. We're still not, and that's what happened to me. And for me, the missing link was detox. So is that part of your protocol? Is that part of what you recommend?
Yeah, well, that's an excellent point, and I'm glad you brought that up, because I experienced the same thing, right? I had the best diet in the world. I'm a nutritionist. I was doing everything right, but I still felt horrible. And so what I didn't know is I had very high mercury levels. I had a raging candida infection that I didn't know about. I had a mold exposure that was still hanging on. And I had some emotional work that I needed to address. So detox is very important, but we must be extremely careful before we jump into a detox if we don't have direction. And actually this happened to me. This is actually when my symptoms went from I kind of don't feel well to very severe. I bought a book. It was a detox book. I went through it and my symptoms exploded. And it was, I mean, that was probably the biggest mistake I made in my healing journey, because I didn't know that my elimination pathways weren't open. I didn't know that I had heavy metals. I didn't know that I have a gene that makes me unable to detox pesticides and herbicides. I didn't know at the time that I had Lyme. So I was trying to force this detox, and it stirred up all of these things inside my body, and I became much, much, much worse. So detox is very important, because if we've got these underlying issues, we need to get it out of the body, but we need to do it in a very careful, systemic approach. And I really suggest, strongly encourage that if people need to detox, they need to work with a professional that knows how to take them through it very gently, making sure that the elimination pathways are open and that you're actually ready for the next step in the detox protocol so that you do it appropriately for you.
Absolutely. Yeah, because the danger is, as you say, that you actually make yourself worse and your symptoms just flare up out of control, and kind of not even back to step one. It's like it's just off the scale, symptomatic. So yeah, having these elimination pathways, as you call it, being making it so that your body is able to eliminate these toxins. So the toxins are there, but you have to be able to eliminate them effectively, and there's a whole process to that. And if you're on your own, then you can you're probably going to get lost doing this. It is really, really tough to do on your own, and you need guidance. So I think, you're absolutely right to recommend that. So and so in terms of, one of the things you mentioned a few times there was trauma. I think that's super, super important. And so obviously we've got the physical trauma, and so we've got that, but then there's like this other trauma, emotional trauma, which I mean, we're not going to say all disease is linked to emotional trauma, but oftentimes it is, or it plays a part. And it can be things from our past, kind of things we've forgotten that happened to us that are creating some sort of energetic blockage. And so this is something we really, really have to work with. Do you have a recommendation on that, what you did to work with that?
Well, again, every person is different and they're going to respond differently to different protocols or different techniques. For me, I did kind of the classic talk therapy with a psychiatrist or a psychologist. That worked really well for me. That's not going to work for everybody. There are some good programs out there like Annie Hopper's dynamic neural retraining program, I think it is. And then the Gupta program.
Yeah.
There's a couple others. And that the whole idea there is to do these exercises as you go through the program to tell the brain that it's not in fight or flight mode. Because many of us who have these long-term chronic symptoms, part of that emotional trauma is our brain has learned, I'm in danger and I don't want to let down my guard because I want to protect you. So it stays in this sympathetic nervous system, which is the fight or flight system. And then we just continue to have this, this tense and anxious fight or flight response, when what we really want is to get into the parasympathetic nervous system, which is our rest and digest, where we're calm and where our body has the ability to heal, because our body can't heal when it's in fight or flight. It can only really start to heal when it's in this relaxed parasympathetic nervous system state. So going through these exercises and these programs is all about helping the brain realize, oh, I'm not in danger right now. I can relax and I can actually start to heal. So those are good options for people to explore. There's a lot of other techniques that have been really successful for some of my clients, like EFT, which is emotional freedom technique. There's EMDR, which is a specific eye movement technique that a trained therapist can use with you. I think a lot of it has to do with just finding the right approach that you specifically are going to resonate with the best.
Yes. Yeah. Okay. Very good. So let's talk about 5G then, if we can. So there's, so 5G, it means a lot of different things, really, doesn't it? It's a rather a blanket term, and it's this new generation. In some parts of the world, it's going to be this millimeter wave, and that's where the concern seems to be with regard to that. So, and I'm sure you're getting people who are contacting you who are concerned, who are worried about 5G and asking, what can we do about 5G? So firstly, just, in your view, how concerned should we be about 5G? Just to answer that one.
Yeah, great question. Well, there's a couple different things to know when it comes to 5G. So here in Boise, they're putting it up all over. And I've got a couple that have just been erected pretty close to my home, so a couple of blocks from my home. And the real concern is the distance from our homes with 5G, not necessarily because it's this millimeter wave technology. The reason why I'm not that concerned about the millimeter waves is for a few reasons. One, the millimeter waves are on demand only. So a 4G or a 3G or a 2G antenna is putting its radio frequency signals out all the time. It's constantly putting its signals out for the whole town so that somebody can pick up their phone and make a call. The 5G antennas, however, aren't doing that. They're dormant until a device calls on it. So if I have a 5G antenna in front of my house, I'm not really being exposed to those 5G millimeter waves unless I have a device, or unless I'm in the way of someone else's device that is directly behind me, let's say, because it's also beam formed. And we think it's beam formed in about a 10-degree angle. So that's a pretty narrow beam. So if I'm going to get exposed to those millimeter waves, I really need to be directly in between a device and the antenna. And right now, most people do not have 5G enabled devices. So those antennas aren't really doing much. So today, I'm not that concerned about the millimeter waves for those reasons, because we're really not getting exposed to them. However, the issue is that because the millimeter waves don't travel that far, the telecom companies are putting the antennas very close to our homes with a 4G antenna, because the 5G doesn't work without the 4G. So the real concern here is that now you've got an antenna, and in Boise, it can be within 30 inches of your property. and you've got a 4G antenna on your sidewalk, and that antenna is giving you 24-hour exposure of frequencies that are lower, but they're still just as biologically harmful. So it's the proximity to the tower that I'm concerned about, because they are putting them on our streets, in front of our homes, very, very close to our homes. And that's why I'm so concerned about these quote unquote 4G, 5G antennas that are popping up in many of our cities.
So people who call you, send you an email saying, Cathy, how can I protect myself from 5G? What do you say to them?
Well, we first need to figure out if you are close to an antenna. If your home is very close to antenna, you know, after you have taken care of all of the devices inside your home, we may need to shield, right? I rarely suggest whole home shielding for a client, because there's so many considerations. It's expensive. Some people feel worse. You got to do it right. It's complicated. But if you've got a 5G antenna 30 inches from your property or on your sidewalk, or even a couple blocks, and you're getting a high exposure from either the 5G waves or the 4G waves, we may need to look at painting, window cleaning, curtains, you know, some more extensive shielding, so that we can reduce your exposure while you're at home.
Okay. Should we be concerned really about, you know, that's sort of, because it seems to me there is, you know, there's kind of good and bad with this 5G, and the good is that it's alerted people to the EMF question. That's what, you know, so on balance, it really seems as though, for the moment anyway, I'm not saying it's a good thing, but, you know, that people are beginning. And so you've been involved in this advocacy group, what is it?
Idahoans for Safe
Idahoans,
Technology.
yeah, Idahoans for Safe Technology. So yeah, let's talk about that, because that's important, is it? So there's what we can do to protect ourselves, which you've just talked about, but then there's this role we have to play as people that are in the know, so to speak, about what we can do to get the word out, so that you know, this, maybe we can, if not stop this 5G rolling out, that we can slow it down, or maybe make it safer. Okay, maybe I'm dreaming a bit, but yeah. So so for people that are listening, that are worried about 5G and would like to create a group like that, yeah, what would you say to them?
Extremely important. Yes. If there's not a group that is in your community, I think this is extremely important, because we need to raise awareness, right? That's what it's all about. And when I started my group 2 years ago, Lloyd, I have zero experience in politics or advocacy of this type, but I knew I had to do something. I knew that I had to raise awareness about this issue, because I didn't want our city to be inundated with these towers so close to our homes. And as I began to talk to people, they were like, well, I don't know anything about this. What are you talking about? And then when I began to explain it to them, you know, then they said, well, what can I do? And now I have a fully functioning board. You know, we are a 501c3 nonprofit, only because I said, I raised the alarms, and I reached people that didn't know about it, that were concerned about it. And now we're raising awareness, which is the most important thing we can do, because if we just get up and leave and say, well, I don't want to live here because you've got these towers, I'm going to go to the country, but we don't let other people know, then all these other people are stuck with it.
Yeah, it's our duty.
It's our duty. I agree. It's our duty.
So how did that start? You know, how did you get these people? So now it's all organized, you've got this charity status, whatever. So that's great. But how do we start this?
That's an excellent question. You know, I just started posting things on social media. Like I used Nextdoor, and I said, hey, does anybody want to join me? Here's my concern. I posted things on Facebook, which, you know, I don't use social media a lot, but for these reasons, it was helpful. I began to go do talks in the community. Like, we have a natural food grocery store. And so I would do talks there and I say, hey, does anybody want to join me? I went to medical providers and said, this is what I do. If you want to be a part of this, please join us. It was very grassroots on the ground, and one thing led to another. And then this person knew this person. And then suddenly I've got a group of people that are interested. It took a long time and it took a lot of effort on my part. And I'm introverted, so this was very difficult for me, but I couldn't live with myself if I didn't try. Right.
Yeah, absolutely. Well done on trying. And is this actually, do you feel this is actually bearing fruit, what you've done? Is it changing things?
Well, in Boise, unfortunately, it's not. We have gone to the planning and zoning department. We have gone to the city council. I have appealed some of the antennas, but we have been denied at every step. Unfortunately, this is largely due to the fact that there is a large amount of industry indoctrination in our lawmakers, and our lawmakers think that they don't have any ability to deny these applications for towers. That's not true. That's a whole nother conversation, but there's so much industry indoctrination, which is why we're trying to educate them. However, there's a lot of surrounding cities in our area that we have gone to their mayors and to their city councils, and we are actually making a lot of impact, and they are listening to us, and they are looking at their zoning requirements and putting ordinances in that will protect the communities from the proximity of these towers. They're putting setbacks in their ordinances so that they can only be a certain distance from homes. And that's fantastic. Yeah. So these other cities are listening to us, and it has been fruitful in that way.
Yeah, excellent. Okay. So we're pretty much out of time. Is there anything you want to share with the listeners before we close off here, Cathy?
I would just say, if you are dealing with some of these symptoms, I strongly encourage you to reach out to a healthcare professional so that they can take you through this, very strategic process of becoming healthier so that you don't have to live with so much, so much of these symptoms. I do a course personally. I work with people. It's a 6-month course that I go through each step with them. We clean up their home. We clean up their cookware, their body care products, improve their air quality. We do functional medicine testing. We get rid of the mold, all of these things. So no matter where you are in the world, I would just suggest, reach out to professionals so that you don't have to do this on your own, so that you have guidance and that you do it properly, because there is hope for you. I know that this can be a very scary place, that you feel like you're never going to get better. That's not true. You can get better. So, have hope, reach out to a professional, let someone guide you so that you can make progress and get better so that you can live, the healthy and abundant life that we all deserve to live.
Yeah, excellent. Great advice. And we have to have hope, and the body is built to heal. We tend to forget that when we get really sick, and we're in this sort of vicious cycle, and it's very difficult to break out of that. And that's, you're right to underline that we need to reach out and go to the healthcare professionals. And that's the great thing now with the internet, is that you don't have to have somebody local. You can do this online, and we can do it with you. We can do it with Cathy Cooke. And what you need to do is go to Cathy's website, which I'm going to give again. It's Whole Home and Body Health.com. So that's whole as in WHOLE, home and body health.com. As you've just heard, Cathy is doing, there's lots of great information on there. By the way, there's a blog I noticed, and lots of, you can sign up to get tips on dealing with EMFs, I noticed. And also, so there's this health coaching course, which is a really, really great idea. And honestly, that I do believe is the best way to get through this, is with somebody who's actually got through it, been there, done it, and is still smiling. So Cathy Cooke, thank you so much. It's been wonderful
you,
speaking
Lloyd.
with you. You've shared a wealth of information, and yeah, it's great that you're doing this work, this EMF work, and you know, this with the institute, and also this advocacy work. It's very important that everybody gets involved at doing this.
Well, thank you, Lloyd. It's been a real pleasure and a real honor to speak with you today.
Thank you. Thank you. My pleasure. The pleasure's all mine. And thank you, listener, for attending today. If you're looking for solutions to do with EMFs and their effect on your health, this interview and all my previous interviews are available in the EMF Experts Solutions Club with transcripts. Information is on my website. In the next episode, I'll be interviewing another expert, so watch your inbox for details. My name is Lloyd Burrell from electricsense.com. Thank you so much. Have a great day. Thank you. Bye-bye.